Good afternoon, and welcome to a podcast in our series titled Past, Present, and Future, Perspective on Mental Health in the Black Community. This initiative will consist of a series of podcasts, forums, and healing circles over a 6-month period that strive to expose the negative stigma associated with mental health, encourage open and honest discussions amongst men, women, and youth, and provide tangible solutions towards healing and recovery. We also want to show our appreciation to the City of Toronto for the support towards this important initiative. I am your gracious and humble host, Tristan Williams, social support worker at C Center for Young Black Professionals. And it's a pleasure to welcome you to this important discussion. Today's podcast is titled Break the Silence: Black Canadian Youth and Mental Health Disparities. In this podcast, we will tackle the intersection of Black mental health, racism, and its effect towards Black youth. The mental health crisis towards Black youth is not new, but it has been magnified due to COVID-19. A discussion will also occur on how Black youth in Canada experience poor mental health outcomes due to poor access to mental health resources and support. Discrimination, gender inequity, low income, societal pressure, and stigma are all factors and experiences that create hesitation for seeking services. There's also low knowledge on mental health utilization due to distrust and insufficient knowledge of race, gender, and sexuality-based issues, creating repercussions towards Black youth who are vulnerable members of society.
While the intention of this podcast is to create an environment of knowledge sharing, positive affirmations, and space for joy, some content may be emotionally triggering and of a sensitive nature. This podcast will feature content related to issues related to mental health in the Black community, which may be emotionally triggering for some. If you or someone you know is triggered by this content or is experiencing a mental health concern, including having thoughts of suicide, support is available. Immediate support is accessible by calling 211 or 1-855-310-2673. You can speak with a crisis worker at any time. Children and youth can also access telephone support 24/7 by contacting the Black Youth Helpline at 416-285-9944. For immediate emergency support, please call 911. All services are free and can be accessed confidentially.
Joining me in today's podcast are Jason Best and Erica Kakra. If you could, Jason, please introduce yourself to our audience.
Thank you for having me, Tristan. It's Jason York Best, YORKE-BEST. Thank you for having me. I am a youth and family worker, community worker. Right now, I'm a part of the STRIDES program as a provincial youth outreach worker.
And if I could ask you, Jason, what was inspiration for you pursuing this profession?
Wow. The aspiration was based on how I was raised and the support circle I had around me. I was a practitioner of hip hop culture, was a breakdancer, DJ, and was a part of the Zulu Nation at one time. And being immersed into that culture at the time, it was all about each one teach one and giving back to the community and making the community a better and stronger place to thrive for anyone coming up under you. So that's where it was just a passion. It was just a way of life of being. I don't consider this a work or a career. I look at this as just my way of life.
Thank you so much. And Erica, if you could introduce yourself to our audience.
Hi, thank you, Tristan, for having me. My name is Erica Kakra. I am currently a Master's of Social Work student at York University. I also work as a social support worker with the C Center for Young Black Professionals.
And Erica, what is your inspiration for pursuing a career in this field?
My inspiration comes from my lived experience. So I am the daughter of two African immigrants who came to Canada to basically build a dream from scratch. They had a premature child, myself, and social workers were their first point of contact, right? And they helped my parents sort of develop as new immigrants and as new parents to take care of me. And I saw that throughout my life until my family was able to be self-sufficient and stand and find their Canadian dream, so to speak. And so because I've had social workers sort of as the thread of my life, this is what inspired me to go to school and, just get into the idea of giving back as things have been given to me so that I can thrive and survive. Like Jason said, I do not find my education or my job as, a career or just work that I have to wake up and do in the morning. I find this as a way to do something meaningful and intentional and just purposeful so that I know that I have poured into somebody else just as was done for me.
Thank you so much, Erica. And to all of you listening, again, I am Tristan Williams, your host. A little bit about me. My journey towards this work actually started in college while I was pursuing a diploma in police foundations. I had originally wanted to become a police officer, hoping to, create a shift in the culture of policing, as well as a shift in the way that our community viewed the police. And, in college, I was able to learn how crime is committed, and how the police respond to crime. But my thirst for knowledge actually led me to university, where I pursued a degree in criminology. And that's where I learned the why, right? Why did my community have to go through the things that they were going through? Why was crime committed? And, why were certain communities subjected to more unjust practices at the hands of the police? And so with all of this knowledge that I gained, I actually no longer wanted to be a part of a punitive solution. I actually wanted to, become a part of the grassroots solution that would be able to help curb, individuals that are going through hard times that would push them towards, criminality. Instead, I wanted to provide that support that would give them better outcomes. And so, Jason, Erica, I'm just going to I'm going to ask you guys a few questions. We're going to be able to have a great discussion. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to start off with you, Jason. And so, in your opinion, is the state of mental health among Black youth And so, Jason, in your opinion, what is the state of mental health among Black youth in Toronto today?
It's in a state of crisis, to be honest with you. The access to services are somewhat there because in my work day to day, I do assist individuals getting access to resources to support their needs. But unfortunately, there's not a lot. There isn't enough. As you're talking about in this podcast, how COVID-19 has impacted that, parents and individuals weren't able to see a lot of the ailments that their children or youth were suffering from, and having that time at home to reconnect as a family. And some of these behaviors were coming out and they didn't know what they were. They didn't know how to approach them. And now that they have been able to identify them, the services are there, but they're backed up. When the individual is having some type of an behavioral episode or behavioral crisis, they'll call myself or my partner or any other YOW or any other service provider to come and out the fire, and then we'll try to redirect them to services. And it ends up in leaving your name, leaving an email, and we'll get back to you. But the problem is right now, that it's happening right now. So a call and an email builds that lack of trust, that distrust, that why would I even call? It doesn't make sense. So therefore, you have a lot of individuals that are just coping, and the coping is just leaving it. I don't know what to do with him. I don't know what to do with her. Or, I have one young person who periodically calls me when there's a crisis. And a lot of the time it's me just being on the phone doing informal therapy when she should be seeing someone, and she can't get access to that because they either tell her that services are full or she has to make an appointment, which is 3 months later from now, and the problem is right now. And it's not an emergency because no one's getting hurt. It's not an emergency because no one got hurt. It's not an emergency because your life is not threatened, when it's an emergency to that person. So right now the fire is burning, and it's burning hot.
I couldn't agree anymore, Jason. In a lot of my initial interactions with some of my members, they speak to a distrust that they have with the social safety net, right? They speak of constantly being let down, or, feeling as though they are nothing more than a number, which is why when they start to interact with an organization like C or me, I could tell that it's a bit of a fresh breath of fresh air. So I definitely agree. There's definitely a lack, but I'd love to follow up with your answer to the question, Erica. In your opinion, what is the state of mental health among Black youth in Toronto today?
I think Jason hit a really crucial point in that I think it is a negative. I think the state of Black youth's mental health in Toronto is skewing negative. And he hit a really good point, because it comes down to access, right? It comes down to, timing. It comes down to, what do they need right now as opposed to 3 months from now? And I think the reason why that is the larger policies put in place, right? I think when there are policies put in place, those policies tie up your hands as a community social worker. They tie your hands in that you can't advocate enough. There's a lot of bureaucracy and red tape, and there's only so much of that you can cut through. And I think when we as community social workers who are working within the community on the ground, there is only so much red tape that you can jump over. And sometimes it's draining. It's draining on yourself as a worker, and draining yourself as a person, because this is your community member. This person could easily be a little cousin, a little brother, a little sister, an older brother, an older sister. This is somebody who could be a part of your village, right? Because as our ancestors lived, we have a communal mindset, right? We have a communal mindset. I think with COVID-19 making this worse, I think when COVID happened, one of the first things to happen was the isolation, right? The isolation really hyped the isolation of COVID-19 really intensified feelings of uncertainty, feelings of anxiety, feelings of loss of a routine. Right? If you have something you're doing every day to cope with your mental health, you may not even be in a state of crisis, but if you're having little things that you're doing to cope with your mental health, they're things that take you toward mindfulness, and all of a sudden a global pandemic comes and tells you that due to government policy, again, you can't do those things. It really throws you off, and it could send you back to where you were when you were in crisis, right? So I think for somebody who is in the mental state of being isolated or being alone, when there's a loss of that, now it's external, and you can't even call anybody to relate or see anybody. Just the idea of, seeing somebody, just the idea of getting to hug somebody, right? Even the idea of a friendly a friendly hand on your shoulder, you can't do that because of COVID-19. So it's really made the mental health of Black youth in Toronto worse.
Yeah, I definitely agree, Erica. And if I could use a word, I would say that the state that our Black youth are in at the moment is in survival mode.
Yes,
right.
I agree.
I feel like COVID-19 has really already highlighted a culture that has been shifting from communal culture to one that is really focused on, or hyper focused, I would say, on individualism.
Yes.
And so many of our youth are going through these issues. They're now facing social anxiety because they haven't interacted with, their peers or their loved ones in a very long time. And I think that those things are, compounding to make a situation that was already dire much worse. But thank you guys so much for these answers. I can tell that we're going to have an amazing conversation. And I'm just going to follow that up with another question. We'll start with you, Erica. Have you or anyone close to you ever experienced racism from a healthcare provider? And if you do know anyone, if you could provide an example, that'd be great.
So I'm very lucky to not have experienced. I know it's out there, and there is research that suggests that Black people are more likely to have less care than their white counterpart because of racism within the healthcare system itself. Me personally, I am very lucky to have not experienced that. And I am also, I do not know anyone who has, right? But I think going back to the research, it's been pronounced. And if you go back further, it's historical.
Yes, ma'am.
Right? It's historical. It goes back to the idea that our ancestors who were put on the slave ships and brought to the US or North America they were seen as chattel. They were seen as property. They were seen as, experiments, right? For any new medical breakthroughs that were coming in that the doctors wanted to explore. And bear in mind, at this time, they were white doctors. So anytime they had a medical idea, they would use the Black body, right? The father of gynecology, quote unquote, his name is, I think, Marlon J. Sims. He only discovered how gynecology worked because he only discovered how gynecology worked because he used the body of a Black woman to figure all of that out, right? He figured out what a C-section was by doing that, right? So throughout the years, it comes down to distrust, it comes down to mistrust, it comes down to the idea of, I don't want a doctor touching me because I don't want to die, right? It comes down to the idea of even a pregnant Black woman, maternal health. Like, we know stories of, Black women not being believed when they have pain or they're feeling discomfort, and then they end up dying or losing their babies, right? For example, somebody as powerful and prestigious as Serena Williams, right? She nearly lost her daughter in her life because there was a blood clot in her leg, and they didn't believe her until she really had to push and say, I am feeling this way, I am not safe, do something, right? So I think it comes down to the racism within the healthcare system is not only institutional, but it's historical because of colonization. And I think I will make the argument to say that it will not change unless we have more medical professionals like us, because lived experience hinges on everything in the Black community.
Thank you so much, Erica. And Mr. Jason York Best, have you or anyone close to you ever experienced racism from a healthcare provider?
I do remember an event that had happened with a doctor and my uncle at the time. I can't give you the specifics, but I knew that there was a lack of service based on the fact of color, based on the ignorance towards understanding the culture or being culturally educated. That being said, I find that a lot of the systemic racism or acts of racism that we as Canadians experience, there's more underlined and subtle
Mhm.
acts rather than the bold up in your face that we are sold to see that's out there, so we don't see the subtle acts, right?
Mhm.
The so I will say yes, there is. I will say yes, I have seen it and experienced it, but I think it's really, really covert and subtle, that if you're not educated enough, and I'm not going to use the term woke, I'm going to use the term educated, to understand and know that this is what racism is. This is the discrimination, because you're making it look like you're helping me, but you're not.
Mhm.
And I think that, echoing what you said, Erica, about having more individuals of color in those spaces, in those doctors and waiting rooms and
Mhm.
offices and blah, and hospitals and clinics, and having more, it just goes to show, like when you step into a South Asian community, a North Asian community, they have doctors and physicians. We need more Black doctors and
Mhm.
physicians that can address our needs, because culturally, yes, we eat different foods, yes, we
Mhm.
we live different lives, and with the disparity of having to be an individual of color within on Canada or North America, there's a lifestyle that comes with that, and
Mhm.
that lifestyle then produces certain ailments. So yes, please, we need more doctors instead of more rappers and more ball players and more, individuals that are caught up in the judicial system.
Yes, Mr. Best, and that definitely goes to the conversation we had earlier about taking back our image, right? But I'm sure we'll get into that a little later on in the conversation. I just want to let you guys know that, in my research for this podcast, I found that another major concern is a lack of access to mental health services due to the location of these facilities, right? These facilities are oftentimes in upper class, white neighborhoods, leaving young people feeling alienated. So my question is, what are your thoughts on this challenge? And before I have any of you guys answer, I'll definitely let you know that from my experience and just listening to discussions that have gone on around me, I've heard people that look like me often say that, mental health services are for white people, right? And so I guess my question is how much does the location of these facilities play into that kind of mentality that many of our youth and peers have developed? If any of you guys would like to jump in, please feel free.
You just stuck me there, because that's wild. Just as you were speaking,
Yeah.
it just triggered a comment that a parent made when we were trying to negotiate or create a logistical way of her daughter being serviced by CAMH, and then just thinking of where CAMH is located. And then I was thinking about that conversation and being like, wow, like that's all the way deep downtown. And this is a family living in Scarborough. And then I was also thinking of just how CAMH looks. And I'm thinking the way the system is so institutionalized rather
Mhm.
than communal. Like when you look at certain service buildings, they're not even inviting to the look, the appeal. So that in itself, if you are an individual of color and your only involvement with institution or service is through a penal or corrective like lens, you know what I mean? If you myself, when I was a young man growing up, I didn't take French class because I didn't understand it, so I behaved in a way that was disruptive. I saw a psychiatrist. Like I literally was seeing a psychiatrist for 2 years when there was French and I just couldn't understand it, right? And so therefore my experience with anything that's to help me is coming from a punitive correctional experience. You know what I mean? So if someone else who needs support then tries to get to these places, which, like you said, are in neighborhoods that are totally away from your community. We have so many hospitals and so many neighborhoods, but if you want to get specialized help, you got to take this travel down into the city. And who's to say that doesn't set off your anxiety, which could be one of your ailments that you have, right? So definitely, I think there is a disconnect physically from community, right? That if you want to really service the community and service the needs of the community, there needs to be more specialized services, not just in Scarborough, not just in the West End, all over the city where you have population numbers of diverse people. Like, you got to have that.
I definitely agree. It's almost like you know, it's almost like being told to eat your vegetables, right?
Mm-hmm.
You may know that it's good for you, but oftentimes we are scolded in order to eat our vegetables, which kind of creates this defiant nature within us to
Mm-hmm.
rebel against something that may be exactly what we need to get the outcomes that we want, right? So I definitely agree. And uh, Erica, you know,
Yes.
how do you feel? How do you feel? How strong, sorry, do you think the correlation between location of, mental health services facilities are to the lack of representation that you see of Black bodies in these spaces?
I think they're very strong because for me myself, I was going through challenges, early on in my 20s, and I was told to see a therapist, right? And early on, I was never open to therapy because, growing up in the family I did, therapy wasn't a thing, right? Just for a bit of context, I was born here, but I grew up, I'll say it, I'm a Ghanaian Canadian, right? So in families like that, it's very hard to open up to the idea of willingly going to see a therapist. But I was in my 20s, I was going through my own internal challenges that I felt that, just, keeping quiet and just talking it over with my support system wasn't enough. I went in, and right away I was turned off because the hospitals are so sterile. Just the idea of the white walls and the scent of disinfectant and a person just asking you to run your name and using all this medical jargon on you that you don't connect with, it's terrifying and it's frustrating because you haven't gone anywhere. You haven't made there has not been a dent made in whatever challenges or whatever mental health traumas that you are trying to unpack, right? I think there needs to be more welcoming spaces that relate to us as Black people in our own communities. If we are therapy adverse, we need to make it so that it is safe to be open to therapy and exploring it, right? In these white neighborhoods, it's not only a geographical connection, which Jason highlighted beautifully, it is a mental disconnection. And the one word that I'll use to add to disconnection is dissonance, right? I think the best definition that I can use in terms of I think the best definition I can use in terms of dissonance is the idea of piano keys, right? There are two keys on a piano that may be together and share space, but if you hit both of them, they sound really bad, right? In the same way, if you are a person of color and you are in a space that is not for you, that is not service towards you, you may share the space, but when you try to work together, it doesn't gel. I think there needs to be I think there needs to be a move away from the Eurocentric sense of care. I think there needs to be a move away from the idea of fixing the person. I think there needs to be a shift from, the racialized person that is going to seek care in these upper class neighborhoods because they're going in with the idea that they know they are broken, but the person who is helping them with their care also thinks of them as broken. So they need to just slap a Band-Aid on a stab wound and it'll be fine, right? I think we need to go back to the idea of using, care and therapy through the lens of a village, right? That we always have the saying that it takes a village, and, our ancestors did live in villages. It was a communal sort of mindset. So I think this challenge is very prevalent in, upper class neighborhoods, having to house all of these services that we as Black people need to take care of our mental health, but it needs to be moved to places that are more familiar to us and more communal to get over that challenge.
And thank you so much, Erica. I just want to let our audience know, how grateful I am for the opportunity to share this platform, with Jason Best and Erica Kakra. As you guys can kind of tell, we definitely have a great sense of sorry, I'm gonna say that again. As you could tell, we definitely have been able to build a strong rapport in a very short amount of time, just through our dedication to the cause that each of us have shown. I also just want to take some time to thank the audience for joining us for today's podcast titled "Break the Silence: Black Canadian Youth and Mental Health Disparities." It is for you that we have these discussions, and with you that we will be able to start to remedy some of the ailments that plague our community. I just wanted to ask you guys a question. Feel free to unmute and answer as you see fit. But what are some of the implications of Black youth not seeking or receiving mental health treatment? I'll say that again. What are some of the implications of Black youth not seeking or receiving mental health treatment?
I'm going to jump on it, Erica. Please forgive me.
Yeah, no
I
problem.
got to jump on that one.
Go ahead.
The implications are violence. The implications are criminal activity, severe criminal activity. I have seen an increase of Black youth who are using cannabis as medication, thinking that the little bit of CBD in that spliff or that blunt will help with their anxiety or help with whatever. Most of the time it's anxiety, because that's the hot word right now. And they smoke. They go get themselves involved with whatever crime or criminal activity that they're involved with. And once they come down, they need to get back high again. And then that further then pushes the button to needing more drugs, because they're finding this need to get this feeling under control. And the sad part is that a lot of these young people, they're involved in some really, really life-changing activities. I mean, if it's not handling individuals like sex trafficking to drugs to guns, there's no real conscious or wise mind thinking in these actions. And this is the impact of individuals that don't have trust in doctors, because they had a doctor who put them on some kind of Ritalin that didn't work, made them feel weird, probably didn't explain it to mom or explained it to the caregiver that this is what the drug will do. And not give them supports to help them through that, because when they take the medication, they're a vegetable and they don't like the way they feel. So many kids have told me, I don't take my medication because I can't function, whereas they still need to function. That's why they're giving them medication to function. At least when they smoke weed, they can function. Even if they're doing something that's illegitimate, they still can function. They take whatever pill, they're a robot. They are a vegetable. They are just sitting there like a zombie, and they don't like that feeling. So of course, no one's going to take their medication. And then that behavior is going to then increase, and it's going to bleed into our communities.
Yes, Jason highlighted something beautifully there, excellently said. I think what it comes down to with one word for me is avoidance, right? When it's not that they're not seeking, or it's not that it's not that Black youth are not seeking the mental health, it's that they don't want to, right? So I think in a way it is a backward sense of agency that they are taking up for themselves to say, I don't want to speak with a professional that I feel disconnected with. I don't want to mess with medication that'll make me feel like I don't want to take medication that will make me groggy or make me feel like I can't function in the world because a doctor told me to. I think it comes down to a sense of control, right? Even when they feel out of control, they will find ways to be in control, right? Even though they are facing, family conflict, and being wrapped up in the justice system, difficulties with school, at least for them, they are in control internally when everything else externally is out of control. So I think that's what it comes down to, two things: the idea of avoiding their problem because they feel like all the other avenues have been set against them, and the idea of control, that they're going to do it themselves because it comes back to being in survival mode.
I just wanted to add to that too. It's not only just the youth, it's also sometimes the parents who are suffering from a mental illness, and they themselves are not trustworthy, and they themselves are not taking their medication, and they themselves sometimes know that their child is suffering from a mental illness, but they don't want to give the child the medication. I have seen a horrifying number of parents who talk about cannabis use with their youth, and I'm just boggled because I'm thinking, what? Right? But I can't come in and say that their way of life is wrong because there's so much distrust, there's so many wounds that need to be healed within the parent. How can the youth or the child even function if the parent is somewhat downtrodden, broken down, still trying to function? And here's this individual trying to live in today's society, and they can't function because their caring adult or their sounding board isn't there. Whether they're there physically, but mentally they're not there, or they're not there at all. So these youth are then, like you said, Erica, in survival mode.
Oh man, this conversation is just so fruitful. While I was doing the research, I definitely came across, youth's tendency to turn towards the practice of self-medication, right? And that was definitely one of the implications that occurred through trying to avoid, turning towards mental health services and mental health treatment. And like you said, Jason, I have definitely seen in my own practice as well as in my own personal life, individuals that turn to cannabis as a initial remedy for anxiety, but then that would cycle into a dependence on drug, right? And so once we've seen that dependence, that ultimately ensured that they would no longer turn towards, mental health treatment. And I just found it really interesting, right? So as time went on and their tolerance went higher, the time in between, the drug use shortened. And so it kind of got to a point in time where these individuals were constantly, under the influence in one way or another as an opportunity to, kind of avoid what they're dealing with, put it on the back burner for now, and constantly, just trying to get away from their reality.
I would like to add to that, because that's where you would see the encouragement or the glorification of pill and medication use in music. If you listen to some of the music, you hear a lot of young artists talking about needing pills to make the pain go away, or just popping pills just to like, that's what they do. And they're mixing it with alcohol. Anyone knows, like, certain medication you can't mix with alcohol. But if you're in that much pain, you have that much struggle with your mental illness, right? That you have to get to that extreme, that these individuals are suffering.
I couldn't agree anymore, man. So just to follow that up, some of the research that I've come across speaks on the personal and community barriers faced by Black youth. It speaks to Black youth actively avoiding to seek care due to the cultural stigma that's attached to it. We've also been able to unearth that, in Black communities, mental illness is often attributed to religious interference. So my question is how can religious observance, help or hinder mental health treatment amongst Black youth? And I'll provide further context. I've had conversations with adults actually. And, in those conversations, I really, advocated for them to seek external help, right? Find a safe space where they would be able to have conversations with someone that they trust. And, I really actually pushed them to, find a Black social worker, find a Black organization where you can seek that help from. That way it's easier to digest the truth coming from someone that looks like you. And after having that discussion, I was ultimately met with a stonewall of, I will pray it away. Right. And every time I hear that, I let the individuals know that God created social workers, psychiatrists, psychologists, psychotherapists for a reason, as a tool to be used to help, his people. So again, my question to you guys is, how can religious observance help or hinder mental health treatment amongst Black youth?
Okay, I think this is the one I need to jump on.
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up, I still am a practicing Christian, right? I have my conversations with the Creator. I read the Bible. I go about religion in a way that is beneficial to me. I think religion can help if you combine spirituality with a sense of realism, right? I think if you pray for grace and you go about with physical actions that allow yourself to, I think when you go about praying for grace and applying the physical act of giving yourself grace, that's how it can be helpful, because they say that actions without prayer is dead. Or sorry, when you pray all the time and there's no action, it's futile. It doesn't mean anything. That is what I meant to say. I think it can help. I think religion can cause harm when you put the connotation of somebody being quote unquote crazy, when you put the connotation of someone being quote unquote possessed, right? When you put the connotation of someone being incurable because the prayers are not working and needing to go to a church only and not seeing a doctor, right? So I think religion, healthy religion, and healthy mental health mindedness have to work hand in hand for anything to, let me say that again. I think healthy practice of mindfulness and the healthy observance of religion in a realistic sense have to work in tandem for mental health, especially Black mental health, to be able to thrive and be managed.
Jason, how do you feel about this?
That pauses me for a minute, because I also find that we have a narrative of what being Black is. And just being a part of this is letting me know that we are working on changing the narrative of what the ideal of being our bodies are. Is that, medication therapy isn't something we do. So the therapy or the medication was the praying. But the praying, as you said, Erica, is effortless without any effort. And therefore, you're praying, but someone who's just thinking that you say, oh Lord Jesus, but you need action with that. And that action with that is being able to trust in God that you can find someone that will understand you, because that's what you really need to pray for. You need to pray to find the way. You're asking God to help me find the way. And then you go out there and you make the walks and the steps in the way which you've prayed for. And I find that our narrative of what Black is what is definitely um, hindering us from making the strides we need to do, because we've subscribed to this ideology. And it's not just like, it's been glorified. Like, come on, like you can turn on BET, you can turn on Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, whatever, and you see YouTube, you see what the ideology of Blackness is. And until we lose that and move in the direction of understanding that we're human, we're not just Black people, we're humans, and using that thought process to move in the direction of healing, you know. um it just really hurts me, because I have seen and have had conversations that I've had to literally step back and take an understanding, being mindful, like Erica said, knowing that I wasn't going to make any headway because I would be challenging someone's faith, and I wasn't. I was actually asking them to use it.
Mhm.
Wow. Very powerful. I just want to digress very quickly and speak to a point that you made about, the way that we define Blackness. I actually just made a post on my Instagram, and it said, if being smart is acting white, then what is being Black, right? What does being Black mean? Right? If we often attribute, utilizing mental health services, if we utilize using correct grammar, pursuing a degree or a diploma as acting white, then what does that mean for us who are Black? And what does that mean for us who want to kind of get an understanding of what Blackness means? And as I said earlier, I knew that we would touch a bit more on the importance of taking back our image. But I just want to say that, I'm very proud to be here, and I'm very proud to be able to share this space with each of you, because I think that this is what Blackness is: coming together as a community in order to, seek solutions, leaning on each other, learning from each other, and continuing to push forward and remain resilient. So we're all of those amazing things and more. And so I just wanted to ask, moving forward, what strategies do you think will be the most effective in solving some of the challenges we spoke about today?
um because this topic or solution is multifaceted, right? There's so many layers to the ailments that we suffer from as a people. I think definitely imagery is one. We need to glorify and celebritize different things. That's one thing. We also need to go back to building resilience. I think that resilience has been taken out of the community. If you know anything about your history, we were the most resilient people. We are known to be a resilient people. There were white slaves before there were Black slaves, and the reason why they were Black slaves is because the white slaves could not handle the heat. They could not handle the sun. That's where the term redneck comes from, wetback comes from, because they could not handle it. We are the most resilient people, like just straight. And that is being taken out of us. And with that being taken out of us by design, you know, we need to get back to that. And I'm not saying go through hardships, but understand that within the hardships comes our salvation. And I'm looking at a generation of individuals who have countless and limitless access to resources, and they're not interested, not just because of anything other than it's not glorified. It's not cool. It's not, I do have some youth who are talking and using phrases of therapeutic terms, but they're not doing it. They're just using it because they find, oh, let me use this term because that will get me off of whatever I'm into, or that will help me, get a tax break, or it'll help me get something free. But it was never this whole hold my hand, or this belly aching. I grew up with a single mother. I like the winter more than the summer because my mom had to push me in the winter and in a stroller, in a summer stroller, you know what I mean, in like real snow. And so now I've grown to love the winter, and that's resilience. I find that we do this belly aching and, oh, we don't do that, or, oh, I need help to do that. And I find that the more help that we're asking for, the less stronger we are.
It sounds like, you're really pushing self-empowerment, right? Build from within, and then, utilize the resources that are all around us before we look to allies to kind of solve our issues. And I couldn't agree more, to be completely honest with you. Erica, what are some solutions that you'd be able to, suggest for our youth to deal with some of the challenges that we spoke about today?
So Jason summed it up so beautifully. How could I ever beat that? But I guess what I can say is I think it starts from, I think Tristan, you did say you start internally, not even just within the community, but within oneself, right? I always say, checks and balances. That's my key thing, checks and balances, right? Take a moment in whatever you're facing and examine yourself, do the reflection, and whatever the reflection may yield, even though it's really hard and you don't want to, then how does your inward reflection affect, or what can it do to affect the external positively, right? Then another solution is just as simple as going back to touch. Another solution is just going back to simply the communal way, right? Find people who share in what you're going through, and have a support system. Lean on the support system, and don't be ashamed to do that, because a lot of times there's a lot of shame in talking to someone about your problems in the Black community. But do that, and it may not, the solution may not be immediate, but it's a progress. It's a work that's always done in progress, and embrace that.
I just want to say, I think there's a huge importance on the creation of Black content, right? As somebody who was born in, the 90s, I seen the effects that BET had on the generations that came before me. I see the effects that the gangster, the basketball player, the drug dealer, job aspirations that were pushed onto us. And I seen the effects that it had on those all around me. And so one of the solutions that I think we can do is to start desensitizing ourselves from getting back to our roots by content creation, such as a podcast like this, such as promoting rap music that is for uplifting the community, as you said earlier, Jason. And I think it's all about, giving our youth and those that come after us, an opportunity to understand that the sky is truly the limit, and they don't have to be pigeonholed into, certain lifestyles that are not, the best for them. I just want to take a quick second on behalf of C Center for Young Black Professionals, on behalf of Black to the Future TO. And thank you, Jason. I want to thank you, Erica. This has been an amazing discussion, and I look forward to working with you both in the near future as we look to continue to remedy some of the ailments that plague our community, right? Because together we are strong. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been an honor.
Thank you as well.